Okay, I think I've done the right thing. Thank you for the reminder.
Okay, welcome. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Today's talk is about death and life after. And when we talk of life after death, generally people think that we are coming back to this world. So it is not like that. What I meant by life and after that is according to a Zoroastrian perspective. And in a Zoroastrian perspective, we there is a life after death, but that is for the spirit, the soul, and in the spirit world, and not coming back to the earth. So I would like to set this straight before starting the talk that the title of the topic, Death and Life After, means that the life after death for the spirit or the soul. I think by the end of the talk, the confusion will not be there as it is now. So
Thanks a lot.
generally, we know that death is the most common occurrence in the world after birth, and it is a surest thing for human beings after birth. On an average, about 150,000 people die every day, and that is every 2 deaths per second happening. And we never know who it could be. So that's why the idea of death is generally very terrifying to most people. And the thing is that what we'll try to do in this talk is take away the idea of fear from death. That is the whole idea of this talk, to try and take away the sting of death, the fear of death. And the only way to do it is by understanding death. Because we never try to understand death, because death is generally such a thing that we try not to talk about. Even in our house, we try to broach the subject of death, either your own or somebody's. And the very first sentence we hear in our Parsi houses is, "Eh, wo avar jevu su bole છે." Please don't talk of death. So people are never comfortable about talking about death. And the reason for that is most people consider death as an opposite of life. And that is why that is where the problem starts. Actually, death is not the opposite of life, because in actuality, death is a part of life. It is a part of life where we go to another dimension, where our spirit crosses over. So, first thing first, we should never consider that death is the opposite of life. No, death is not the opposite of life. The opposite of life is life eternal. Death is just a door from which we go from one dimension to another. So that is the first thing that we have to know about death. Please don't consider death as an opposite of life. Today, what we are going to do is try to understand death from a Zoroastrian perspective. And Zoroastrianism is very clear about the fact that everybody who is born has to die. Now, if something is so clear, why are we so confused? Everybody comes to the earth for a purpose, and after fulfilling the purpose, one has to go back from where one has come. So that's why death is something that is not to be detested or feared. But of course, at the same time, it is not to be welcomed also. We should not welcome death, but we should try and understand death and consciously make an effort to keep away death, knowing very well that it is going to come at one point. But at the very same time, as a human being with life and with all the things at our command, what we can do is we can keep death away from us as much as possible. So the point to be considered during this talk is that we will have a rational approach to death and not an emotional one. So like when we think of death as from an emotional point of view, we don't like to talk about it. But I'll please beg your pardon and request you to consider life and death from a rational point of view, at least for the next hour, so that we try to understand the whole idea about death. As I said, death is a part of life and the only certain part of life. Nothing else in life is as certain as death. The moment we are born, the only thing that is certain for us is yes, death will come someday, sometime. And that is because we are living in the finite world. This material world, what we call Geti in our religion, is finite. It has to come to an end according to our religion. So, in something which is finite, life also has to be finite. And that is why death is a part of life. And even we are told in our text that even Prophet Zarathustra asked Ahura Mazda for immortality, not for himself, but so that he'll be able to help the world continuously forever. And then what Ahura Mazda told Zarathustra is worth remembering. He said,
Would you all please mute yourselves?
Prophet Zarathustra was told by Ahura Mazda that if I give you immortality, then evil will become immortal. And the whole purpose of the world will not be served. So that immortality cannot be a part of anybody's life. The physical life has to come to an end. So what we have to understand is that we have to remove the negative perception of life, and then things will fall into a better perspective. The moment we try to understand that death is a transition for the soul and not the end of life, we have to think of death as a time, a door from where our soul exits from one side and enters into another side. The soul never dies. A human soul, whether you call it Ravan or Urvan, or the Indians call it Atma, whatever you call it, soul, it never dies. The soul never dies. So death is for the physical body and not for the soul. In our Zoroastrian texts, like the Gathas, the Vandidar, and in our Pelvi text, we are told a lot about death. And what I'm going to talk to you today, the Zoroastrian concept of death, is basically based on our Zoroastrian text. Now, in Avastha, a human being is called Mashya. If you look up in the dictionary, the word Mashya means man, but the literal meaning of Mashya means mortal. It is derived from root mar, to die. So the very word man in Avastha means one who is born to die. So the idea of death is there in the very word for Avasthan word for men, and that word is Mashya. So Mashya is one who is destined to die. Death is destined for everybody. Now we Zoroastrians consider death as a temporary triumph of evil. Temporary triumph of Angra Mainyu. Why? Mainly because of two reasons. The first reason is that death takes away life from the body, and our corpse, our dead body, starts putrefying. It becomes naso. And anything that becomes naso is something which has been taken over by evil. So that's why that is the temporary triumph of evil as long as you properly dispose of the body. And second reason why death is called temporary triumph of evil is because that we, all of us human beings, are soldiers of Ahura Mazda. So a death means one soldier less for Ahura Mazda. And that is why it is a temporary triumph of evil. But we have been given religious prescriptions by which we can overcome this temporary triumph of evil. But unnatural and untimely death is more a work of evil than natural death. There are two types of death. Natural death, when we grow old, the processes of our body slow down, the organs of our body gradually start shutting down, and a point comes when our body purpose is served and it is no longer works, and that is natural death. Unnatural death is either when somebody who is healthy dies for one reason or another. That is generally the work of evil. Because according to our religion, Ahriman or evil attacks you. It can attack you either for your bad deeds or it can attack you at random. When Ahriman attacks you, you have to have protection. Then Ahriman will be defeated. But sometimes we are not able to get that protection. So because of the random or chaotic attack of Ahriman, we may have an untimely death. Second reason for untimely death is there may have been some negligence, some carelessness on our part or the part of somebody else. And negligence or carelessness is a work of evil. And that also may be a cause of unnatural death. So important point is we have to try and avoid untimely and unnatural death as much as possible. But natural death is very much a part of our life. According to Zoroastrian religion, a human being is considered of 9 parts, all of us. Out of that, 3 are physical. After that, they decompose and they then transform themselves into elements. 3 other are invisible but yet physical, and they disintegrate into nature. And finally, the last 3, the spiritual, never die. They return back to the spiritual world. And our soul, our Fravashi, is part of that spiritual constituent which never dies. Thus, out of the 9 constituents, only 3 you can say are destroyed. The others are not destroyed. So that's why death is never a total destruction. You can call it a transformation. You can call it a transition of the soul, but it is never total destruction. And see, we say that every word tells us a story. So what is the word for death in Avastha? The word for death is irista. We Parsis say gujri gyo. Apne Parsi boliye gujri gyo. English ma we say the person passed away. In Avastha we say irista. Now all these words mean the same thing. A transformation and a transition, passing away. If a person passes, then that does not mean that he stopped. So the very word for death in Avastha irista means it's a passing of the soul from the physical world to the spiritual world. It does not indicate a cessation or a total end. So though death is a certainty, આપણે કેટલાક વખત એમ બોલીએ we say કે the moment of death is also predestined. The manner of death is also predestined. Now, I generally, logically, beg to differ from this idea that the moment and manner of our death is predestined. Because in our prayer, we often ask for long life. In our Ammai Rasya prayer, we say, Ammai daregam darego jitim. What does that line mean? What does the line Ammai daregam darego jitim means? That line means I pray for a long life. Now, if death was predestined, why would you pray for a long life? Why would Avastha give a prayer for a long life? Why should we pray for something which is non-existent? So that makes me think that the very prayer for long life means that death to a certain extent is in our hands. How we live our life. Do we live a healthy life? Do we live a proper life? Do we live a conscious life? So if we are living that life, then we can prolong our death to a great extent. Nobody can stop death, but we can at least prolong the moment of our death. And that is where the mystery and the fear of death comes. We are generally mystified of death. We fear death because it is uncertain. And anything is uncertain brings a sort of an element of fear or mystery. When something is certain, we are confident. But when something is uncertain, we are fearful. So that's why we are afraid of death, and that's where we have to work on that aspect. We have to work on the aspect of fear of death. So as I said, when a person dies, we have to do one thing. The body has to be disposed as soon as possible because it becomes nasu. Now, today we are more paranoid of death than perhaps in the past, because as we see in our Zoroastrian tradition, people had used to accept death. In the past couple of generations, we see that our ancestors used to prepare for their death. આપણે કેમ traveling ને વાસ્તે prepare કરીએ, આપણો bag pack કરીએ, and we are ready for our journey. Some people do it 1 week in advance, some people do it more than that in advance, some may do it 1 day in advance, but all of us prepare for our journey. So our ancestors used to prepare for death. And how? એ લોકોના after death પછીના જે કપડા છે ને, they used to prepare it themselves and keep it in their cupboards, and perhaps even show it to somebody, members of the family, and that used to be called a gasri. મોટની ગાસરી કે રવાનની ગાસરી એમ બોલતા હતા. Gasri is a Gujarati word, means a small bundle, and in that small bundle they would keep clothes which would be used after death. That would generally constitute sadra, kasti, pajama, towel and bed sheets, white all. So એ મરલી જેવી પોટલી બનાવીને પોતાની તૈયાર રાખતા હતા. ને they used to tell people of the house કે મારી ગાંસરી અહીંયા છે, મારી રજા કજા બાદ આ વાપરજો. So they used to be prepared for death. They did not fear or worry death. They knew that yeah, one day it is going to come and I am ready or prepared for it. I've even known people who would be ready with their own obituaries, and sometimes their own, even like what we say, Paidas Lakwani, all those things also, some people are prepared with all these things. That is because these people have accepted that yes, death is a part of life and it will come. Though I will not bring it. We don't have to bring death. We have to prolong it. But we have to accept that it is going to come one day or the other. In the past, when a person was about to die, there was something called akhyanu. That is a small gift to the poor. As one of the last things for the deceased, when people would feel time now it is not possible that the person would live for long. So the person no hath the akhyana par, that is, it would be a small khunchi in which there would be rice or wheat or something. Then you upar hath mukave, મોબેદ ને બોલાવે કે ઘેરનું જ કોઈ માણસ એક તંદુરસ્તી બને પેલા માણસની. And then they believe that if the life is to live, it can live peacefully. So that was one of the last charity that the person would do. So at the time of death, generally what a person was supposed to do, all this preparedness was there for death. A person who may be breathing his last, the head was to be covered. And ideally the person, if possible, should recite the own Patet Pashemani. But if not, at the time of death, the person should recite at least one Hashem vow. That should be the last thought and the last word for a dying person. What I'm trying to say here is that the preparedness for death was there in our culture. It is not something new I am telling you. That preparedness for death has always been there. at the time of death, an oil lamp is lit so that the person who is to pass away, the soul which will come out now, is comforted by that. And after the person's death, a person next to the person keeps the hand on the dying person and continuously keeps on reciting Hashem Vav. One can take turns for this also until the Sachkar, that is the final bath, is done. This has to be continued. This is very beneficial for the corpse as well as for the soul. Some people scatter rose petals or flower petals over the deceased bed, but this is not a Zoroastrian practice and these are to be discontinued. Some people consider death as an inauspicious thing, a time of mourning, and so people remove auspicious symbols like chalk or toran after a person passes away. So these are the things which happen generally at the moment of death. Now in the house generally, nowadays people not die even in hospitals, but when people used to die more or less in the house, people used to avoid cooking in the house, avoid the use of fire as much as possible in the house. Non-veg food was particularly not cooked for the first 3 days after death. And in our Vandidad, we have been told that the Nasu, the Druja Nasu, that is the demon of putrefaction, attacks the person who is dead in the house because the dead body is in the house. And generally, the Druja Nasu's effect is therefore 72 hours, that is about 3 days and nights. So that is why meat or non-vegetarian food was not to be brought in the house, and that led to our Zoroastrian tradition of not cooking non-vegetarian food in the house. Many people erroneously believe that this is a mark of mourning. Not eating non-vegetarian food is a mark of mourning, but it is not a mark of mourning. It is a religious injunction that the non-vegetarian food should not be brought in the house for 3 days and nights. From the 4th day, non-vegetarian food can be eaten. This gave birth to the practice of preparing dhansak and kebab on the 4th day. But many vegetarian people, they feel that why is it this necessary? Why is it compulsory to eat non-vegetarian food on the 4th day? But it is not at all compulsory to eat non-vegetarian food. The only injunction is you may start eating. It is not that you must eat. So if there is a vegetarian person, it's not incumbent upon that vegetarian person to eat dhansak and kebab on the day after charam. But if you have not eaten it for the first 3 days after death, one can start eating it after charam. So it's not compulsory, but one can start it. Now we come to a very sensitive issue of grieving and mourning after death. See, death takes away the physical body of the person from us. We all are very attached to our dear ones, our friends, people in the world, and that's why death definitely brings a lot of sadness. But our religious enjoin us that do grieve, do mourn, but only in a limited manner. And you will be surprised to know that in the Vandidad, there are injunctions about grieving also. That how long should one grieve for a person? So, I'll talk about that. But grieving for a person for a very long time makes the progress of the soul difficult. Because the soul's attachment to this world is more if we keep on grieving and mourning very ostentatiously. So of course we will have sorrow in our hearts, we will have sadness, but we will have to make a conscious attempt to control that. Many a time people mourn because they miss a person. But now you have to think from the point of view of the other person. That of course it is our loss. We have lost the person. But think of the soul now, not of yourself. Think of the soul. The soul is freed to go to the spiritual world. Now you have to think of the soul. Now you have to think of the progress of the soul. Now you have to think of the future journey of the soul. So we should not do anything that will thwart the progress of the soul. And we are told that excessive grieving and mourning for a person does thwart the progress of the soul. So we should think less from our own point of view and think more from the point of view of the person who is deceased. As I told, Vandita 12 has specific instructions regarding mourning. And we are told that a maximum of 6 months is allowed for mourning, and that also for the head of the family only. For other people like parents and siblings and children, shorter periods are given. So you should not mourn for a very long time. The idea is we should not take this very literally, but we should take it symbolically that one should not mourn for a very long period. And a very interesting thing and perhaps a humorous thing is that in the Vandidat it is mentioned that if the person is a good person, you don't need to mourn for that person because he has already made his way. Indeed, you need to grieve more for a person who you think was a sinner. So, in the Vandidat, we are told that you can grieve more for a sinner, but for a good person, it is not necessary to grieve. And one of our other texts, a Pahlavi text called the Arda Viratnami, that tells us that it is symbolic again that when we cry for a person, our tears of grief makes a river, and that river makes it more difficult for the soul to cross over to the spiritual world. So if you want that the crossover of your soul of your dear departed one has to be quicker and faster, then you should try and control your tears for the sake of the deceased person. Control your emotions, control your grief, and not shed tears for a very long time. And try to understand death and the concept of soul. So that brings us to the concept of soul. What is a soul? If we know this, if we understand this, then the sting of death will become much less for all of us. Now, our soul, our Ravan, our Urvan, where is its original home? Its original home is in the spiritual world. It had been living in the spiritual world thousands of years before it came down like us human beings, taking a human form. So first think, the original home of the soul for thousands of years has been in the spiritual world. Then there was a mission for which the soul was sent to the world. That mission is twofold, a specific mission and a general mission. The specific mission is that we have to think of the progress and development of our own soul in this life. The general mission is that we have to do good to the whole world and fight evil in the whole world. So for these two purposes, our soul has been sent to the material world. And now, once a soul comes to the world, it is surrounded by many different things, many temptations, evils which come in the garb of temptations. And then when the soul has to take decisions, it becomes responsible for its actions. So now our Ravan, which is in us and with us, becomes responsible for its actions. And after death, the soul will be judged for its actions. So now we have to think about the soul. Now, what happens at the time of death? Till we are living, the soul had our body as the house, had our mind as its guide, either good or bad. either crooked or nice, but the mind was guiding the soul. But now the soul is all by itself, without the body, which was its ally. So the soul becomes very scared now, separating from the body. And an analogy is given in our Pelvi text that the soul is like an infant, a newborn child who starts being scared. But at that point of time, Sarosh Yazat takes over and comforts the soul. And what else comforts the soul is prayers, fire, and fragrance. That's why all these things have to be present at the time of death. Now, at the point of death, the consciousness of the soul comes into being. And the whole life flashes past the soul as a movie sequence. And then the soul thinks, oh my God, what have I done with my life? If it is good, the soul will rejoice. If the life has been wasted, the soul will become death. So for the first 3 days and nights, the soul remains in this world, either happy or sad. In our avastha, we are told that if the soul is happy, it will sing a happy gatha. If the soul is scared, it will sing a gatha which shows its fear. But for the first 3 days and nights, the soul will be in this world as much close to the physical body as possible. Now, during this period, the first 3 days and nights, rituals for the death like Sachkar, Gesarna, Paidas, Utamna, Saroshno, Kando, Bhajdana, all are performed in honor of Sarosh Yazad. Because Sarosh Yazad is the Yazad who is taking care of the soul like a mother and giving comfort to the soul for the first 3 days and nights. Our tradition also tells us that the souls of the near and dear ones also come to greet and comfort the soul for the first 3 days and nights. And so that's why we are often told in our tradition that people who are close to death or who have had a NDE, that is a near death experience, they see the souls of dear ones around them. That is because these souls are given the permission to comfort the soul of a departed one for the first 3 days and nights. Now comes the Charam Ni Bamdad, that is the dawn of the fourth day. And at that point of time, the soul crosses over from the physical world to the spiritual world and goes to its judgment, which is at the entrance of the spiritual world. Sarosh Yazad escorts the soul up till its judgment. The heavenly judges are Meher Yazad, Rashne Yazad, Ashtad Yazad. They judge the soul and then give its place in the spiritual world. Now, here, bear in mind, here is where reincarnation is out of place as in our religion. Because the soul is given place in the spiritual world. We are told of several stages in the spiritual world, like at least 3 stages of hell, at least 7 stages of heaven. And all these stages are told to us where the heavenly tribunal will decide where the soul will go. Now, once the judgment takes place, who comes in front of the soul but its own actions, its own kirdar, which is called Daina in the Zoroastrian religion. Now, depending on the actions of the soul, the Daina will take on a form. If the soul is good, the Daina would be a beautiful maiden, a beautiful girl, a beautiful lady. But if the soul has been evil, the Daina would be in a form of an ugly hag, a witch, and the soul will be terrified of its Daina. Now comes the passing of the Chinvat bridge. Now the soul is scared if the soul is evil. But if the soul is good, it will be happy. So the evil Daina has to drag the soul. The Daina of an evil person has to drag the soul over the Chinvad bridge. The Chinvad bridge starts becoming narrower and narrower for an evil person. It will become as narrow as the edge of a sword, and the soul falls down to hell and goes to one of its stages, wherever its stages in hell is, it goes there. Now the soul of the good person, it is very happy. So the beautiful Daina will escort the soul of a good person over the Chinvad bridge. And that is an allegorical bridge of selection. And once the soul passes over to the other side, it comes across the 7 stages of heaven. So once a soul crosses the Chinvad bridge, it can either go to what is called Hamestakan. Hamestakan means the first stage of heaven, also called the wind station, where if a soul's actions are good or bad, equally, it is in the Hamestagan, which the Christians call a purgatory. In our religion, it is called Hamestakan. Then depending on the spiritual development of the soul, it will have got its stages in heaven. So it will go to the different stages of heaven, which are called Humata, Hukta, Huashta, or star station, moon station, and sun station. Depending on its stages, the soul will have got a place. And then finally comes Garotma, which all souls aspire to. Because the Garotman is the house of God. And for every soul, it is like a homecoming. So every soul after death is dying to go back to Garotman as soon as possible. But depending on its life's actions, its going to Garotman will be delayed. So every soul, that's why when somebody dies, we say that may the soul soon reach Garotman. And that's why in our prayers we say, Ravan Garotmani Bad, Ravan Garotmani Bad, Ravan Garotmani Bad. Means may the soul reach Garotman as soon as possible. So, as we know in our Zoroastrian religion, the world is for a limited period, the material world. So a time will come when the material world will come to an end. By that time, most souls will have reached Garotman. But those souls who have not been able to reach Garotman, there will be another chance for them, a second judgment sort of, where they will be asked to cross a river of molten matter. And if the river, the soul, depending on how much the soul has advanced by now, it will cross over to the spirit, Garotman either early, or the river will either be like warm milk or molten metal. But irrespective of that, all souls will pass to Garotman. So by the end of this material world, all of our souls will definitely reach Garotman. And that is the final aim. Now the Fravashi, our own Ashokarovar, like a good guide, it will always be with the soul till the soul reaches Garotman. And then the Fravashi will go with all other Fravashis. And collectively, these Fravashis are called Arda Fravash. In our religious tradition, we say that over and beyond Garotman also are 2 stages of heaven, which we don't know much about. But when the purpose of this world will be fulfilled completely, then the souls from Garotman will go to Pashwam Akhwan and Anagra Rocha, which are the 2 highest stages of heaven. So this is the journey of the soul. Now think, where are you? Our life of 100 years in this world. Our life of 100 years in this world is but a small part of the soul of thousands and thousands of years. So try to see your own life, our own life in that perspective. That this life is a part of the journey. We had been thousands of years in the spiritual world. For 100 years, we have come to the material world. And then again, we'll go back to the spiritual world. That is the main purpose of the soul. So we are souls basically. And we are bodies only for 100 years. At the time of death, the biggest responsibility of a person is that the body has to be properly disposed as per our religion. And what does that mean? That it should cause the least harm to the living, the least harm to the environment, and the maximum comfort to the soul. So these are the things that we have to keep in mind at the time of death. And the Zoroastrian process of Dukhme Nashini takes care of most of these things. And then our after death rituals like the Sezdo, Sagdi, Yashtakan, Sachkar, Gesarna, Saroshno Kardo, Uthamnu, all these things are meant to comfort the soul of the departed one mostly. And the rituals that are performed after the charam, they are done to give joy to the soul and comfort to the living. So all our rituals have a certain purpose. Now, all of us fear death. All of us fear death, including myself. But we have to have a conscious effort. We have to make a conscious effort to overcome the fear of death. Now, why do we fear death? First of all, it is the uncertainty. Today, death has become more uncertain than in the last year. And that is why all of us fear death. The second reason for fearing death is we have to leave behind those we love. We have to forever lose those we love in a physical sense. And the idea that we will never see a person after death. Not the soul, but the living person will never be able to see the person in physical form after death. So all these compounds the fear of death. However, there are ways and means if we try to, at least to a certain extent, to overcome the fear of death. And in our last segment of our talk, we will do that. We will try and see how we can consciously overcome the fear of death. So first of all, we have to be prepared for death during life. આપણા પારસીઓમાં એક કહેવત છે, આગ લાગે ત્યારે કુવા ખોદવા ગયો. That means તમને જ્યારે કઈ ચીજની નીડ પડે ત્યારે તેને વાસ્તે નહીં કરી શકો. You have to prepare for it. So the first way of to be prepared for death is you have to be prepared for death even now, mentally. So in our Indian tradition, there is a story that three friends were playing cards at a table. Like all of us like to sit and chat. So many Indians like to sit and play cards at a table. So three friends were sitting on a table playing cards. And the god of death, according to Hinduism, Yamraj comes to them and says, okay, come on, all you three friends, you have been together all your life. Now it is time for you to die together. It is time for the death of all three of you. Are you ready? So the first one says, no, Yamraj, please spare me. Give me just 3 days. There is lots of work left undone. I have to do such a lot of things. So please give me 3 days. So Yamraj says, okay. Then he asks the second friend, are you ready to leave? The second friend says, no, I don't want 3 days, but at least give me 3 hours. I want to see my near and dear ones. I want to hug them for one last time. I want to see them for one last time. Please give me 3 hours. And the third friend, this story tells us, he says, what about you? The third friend says, you can take me now. I am ready. I am prepared. So this story in a way tells us that our attitude to death should be somewhat like the third person. Be prepared for death consciously. And how can we do it? First of all, we have to be prepared for our own death. And that can be done by not living for tomorrow that we can do today. Secondly, if we consider that we are a part of God, we consider ourselves a part of our family. Of course, that is very good. Our wife, our husband, our mother, our father, our children, our grandchildren. But we should also start thinking that I am part of God's family. I am closely related to God. God is my first father and last father. That idea has to be inculcated. Then we have to not see ourselves only as bodies, but also as souls. Because as bodies, as I told you, we will be here for 100 years. But as souls, we will be there for thousands of years. So we have to see ourselves as souls and not just bodies. A soul which has come to this world for a mission. And finally, every day of our life, we have to try to live it so fully that we don't regret when it is time to go. That is something very important. Another thing is we have to also to be prepared for the death. God forbid, but the passing away of our near and dear ones. And how can we do that? By loving them so much, by behaving with them in such a way as if it is the last time we are seeing and meeting them. Amna maraya ke kale apne solve kari desu. I have heard quite a few people say કે મેં કાંઈ નહીં એની સાથે એમ કીધું, હું કાંઈ નહીં એની સાથે એમ વર્ત્યો, મેં કાંઈ રાતે એની સાથે વાત નહીં કરી લીધી. Those people are coming before my eyes. So let's not do that. And also to remember that everybody, whether it's relationship or a friend, comes in our life for a purpose. And when that purpose is served, that person has to go. So that thing also has to be born in the mind. So these two things is we have to be prepared for that mentally. Second thing is that we have to always keep in mind that death is inevitable. We are Mashya. Mashya means we are born to die. And that will improve the quality of life also. Once again, I go back to an Indian story about a king who was very cruel and ruthless, who used to harass his people like nobody's business. And the subjects and the ministers and even the king's family were fed up of him. They were told that there is a very wise saint who was staying at the outskirts of the city to go and take his advice. So the ministers and the family of the king go to the sadhu, the saint, and say, please help our king. Please help us. We are fed up of this person. So the saint says, okay, leave it to me. I'll do the needful. The next day, the saint comes to the king. The ill-tempered king says, what is it? Go away. I don't help all sadhus and saints. Sadhu says, I have not come here for anything. I just want to tell you one thing in your ear. Give me 1 second. So king says, okay, do it fast. What is it? The sadhu goes and utters something in the ear of the king. And from that moment on, people see a drastic change in the king. He becomes kind, generous, loving, forgiving. So everybody goes and says, thank you, sadhu. Say, thank you, sadhu. What have you done? So he says, wait, there is still time. So next morning, the king at 9 o'clock in the morning takes a bath and sits. It is 10 o'clock. And then the king calls the sadhu. He says, what happened? King says, no, some mistake. Tomorrow. And then once again, the king lives the life in a good way. Next day, takes a bath at 9 o'clock and sits. Nothing happens. So at 10, he again calls the sadhu. What happened? Again, the same routine goes on for 6-7 days. Now, what the sadhu had said in the mind of the king, in the ears of the king was that you are going to die tomorrow at 9 a.m. The sadhu had gone to the king and in his ears he had uttered, "You are going to die tomorrow at 9 a.m." And that idea of that totally transformed the king from an evil person to a good person, at least for a day. But that was just a teaching of the same to the king. So 1 week passed like that, and then the saint says, "You are not going to die. You are going to live a long life. But now at least you have become good. And now you see the benefits of being good. So always live with the awareness of death as if you are going to die tomorrow." So that is a very important lesson for all of us. Death is inevitable. We have to be prepared with it. And if we live with the inevitability of death, we will live a good life. And last and most important is we should remove the idea of death as something to not think about. We have to think about death. We have to know about death. We have to know the basic facts about death. Firstly, it is impossible to be immortal. Death is a part of every human being. Secondly, soul is immortal. So live a soul conscious life. Third is our original home is not the earth. It is the spiritual world. And if death is the separation from this world, it is a reunion in the spiritual world. So these basic facts we have to know without emotionally attaching ourselves to the knowledge. We have to rationally think of these things. So I'll end today's talk by saying that, see, in today's life, I have heard that there are something called life coaches. All of you may have heard something of the concept of life coach. Somebody who tells you how to live, who coaches you how to live. Now you have to be your own death coach, because there are no death coaches. There are only life coaches. So we have to be our own death coach, and we have to devote time to prepare for our own death as follows. Of course, I think જે 46 જણા present છે તેમાંથી at least 45 જણના માઇન્ડમાં આ વિચાર આવ્યો હશે કે who are you? એવું શું બોલે છે? Why should we think about death? Why should we think about our own death? Who are you, મારી પરથી? But no, nobody wishes for death. Our prayer is Ammai daregam darego jitim. May we have a long, long life. But what is the very next line? In the Ammai Rasya, what is the very next line? Ammai daregam darego jitim pachi next line શું છે? Ammai vaishte maum ashonam. May I attend heaven. So Ammai daregam darego jitim. May we have a long life in this world, but may we also prepare ourselves for heaven. Ammai vaishte maum ashonam. Rochangem vispo khatrem. So our Ammai Rasya prayer teaches us this very important lesson. So how can we be our own death coach? By doing the following things. One is reviewing life whenever possible. What have I achieved in my life? An 18-year-old can do it, and an 80-year-old can do it. Age is no bar. So review our life whenever possible. Secondly, repent for mistakes committed and people hurt. Don't wait કે જ્યારે મારો મરવાનો દિવસ આવશે ત્યારે તે કરશ. It has to be an ongoing thing. Feel remorse for opportunities lost. Take satisfaction for a life well lived. Actually visualize the sorrow on account of living the world, living the possessions, and living the people we love. We need to visualize this. Feel happiness that death is going back to our original home. Visualize the pangs of hell so that you may live a good life. And visualize the joys of heaven so that you may be encouraged to live a good life. And most importantly, think about the eternal friendship with our Supreme Father. Après Hoshbam prayer ma, the last line is Hamem Twa Hakma. In one with friendship with God. Hamem Twa Hakma. That is the final aim of our souls. In one in friendship with God. So death is something that should not be so much of a negative thing. It is something considered to be a part of life for which we should be prepared. So whenever we celebrate a death anniversary of a person, we are not celebrating the death of a person. We are celebrating the life of the person. So આપણે કરે બી કોઈ ગુજરેલાને યાદ કરીએ, we should not think about the death, but think about the life and the legacy of that person. Secondly, the number of years past is not important, but what is important is what we put into that years. We can put a lot in one year than a whole lifetime. So try to put in as much in lifetime as possible. And always remembers, when we pray for the departed ones, we say Nam Chesti Anushe Ravan Ravan. We are saying we are Anushe Ravans, immortal souls. We are not saying we are dead bodies. What do we call ourselves? We call ourselves Anushe Ravans. Nam Chesti Anushe Ravan. So think of ourselves as an Anushe Ravan, as an immortal soul. Death cannot destroy our soul. Death only transmutes our body. So be proud of that immortal soul and immortal life. That yes, I have a life and I have an eternal life. That is what I am. I am a life and I am an eternal life. So we have to fully accept our mortality. There is nothing wrong in accepting our mortality. And it's only then we truly begin to live. So as I like to end with my beautiful line, that in the art of dying is hidden the art of living. If you want to live well, learn the art of death. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rami uncle, for an incredibly interesting talk on quite a sensitive, what can be quite a sensitive topic to many. So thank you very much for objectively teaching us so much and asking us to also leave beside our emotional connection to death and see it from a different perspective. So as a result, as always, we have so many questions, so I'm going to get straight back into it. You mentioned that the human being comprises of 9 constituents, 3 being physical, 3 being spiritual, and 3 being going back to nature. Do we actually know what comprises of those constituents?
Yeah, of course. But because we had finite time, I did not go into it. But I'll just mention them. 3 physical are Tanu, Gaitha, Asdi. Tanu is our covering of skin, muscles, etc. Okay, purely physical. Gaitha are our internal organs. And Asdi is the bony skeleton, the skeletal frame. So in these 3 things comprises our entire physical body, which will be completely destroyed at the time of death. It needs to be completely destroyed, but it doesn't get destroyed. It gets transmuted, because matter and energy are always changeable. So our physical elements will be transmuted to spiritual elements and given back to our soul when the time will come. Those are 3. Then the next 3 are astral, what we call astral, semi-spiritual. That is Kerp, Ushtan and Tevish. Okay, Kerp is our astral body. Ushtan is our life breath, what the Indians call prana. And Tevishi is our body, which are thoughts and emotions and wishes and desires create a body. So the desire body. So these 3 are invisible yet not immortal. So they'll go back into the natural elements like sunlight and wind, etc. The atmosphere, the sunlight. And finally, the 3 spiritual ones, which will never die, which are immortal, and which will remain with the soul are Ravan, that is the soul, the Bodh, that is our consciousness, Bodh, and Fravashi, that's our guardian spirit. They'll always be with our soul till that time the soul needs them, whether it is in this life or in the spiritual life. They'll always keep on guiding the soul and finally go back into their collectives. So that is how our 9 constituents are.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Next question. Sometimes people have their death prayers performed while they are alive. Is there any benefit in getting these ceremonies done while a person is alive?
We have a tradition and a concept called Zinde Ravan. Zinde Ravan means having the death prayers, except the Ge Sarna, of course, which needs a dead body, but the other death prayers performed while living. Why this concept developed was in the hoary past, people used to travel, people used to go for wars, and there was no certainty about life. People would die and nobody would even come to know of for days and weeks and months. So it was keeping in mind those conditions that this idea of Zinde Ravan had developed, that if perchance one passes away and nobody comes to know of it, then if one has rituals performed, the death rituals like Saroshno Kardo, Uthamnu, Charami Baj, those things performed during lifetime, then if perchance death rituals are not performed after death, they will help the soul, comfort the soul till the Charam. So that was the idea of the Zinde Ravan rituals. Nowadays, we are in the times of social media. Whatever happens immediately comes to be known immediately. So this fear of not finding out if something unfortunate happens is not there. So there is no need, if one knows that yeah, the death rituals will be performed, there is no need for a Zinde Ravan nowadays.
Understood. To answer the question whether a recording will be sent to you, yes, they will be. That's something that the AZD committee will organize and send out by email. I believe they've also sent out an email this morning with the 5 previous recordings of the presentations as well. Next question is, immediately after death, a person is required to touch the body and recite Ashembahu. As the dead body is considered Naso, what effect does it have on the person reciting the Ashembahu? And this is also keeping in mind that after the Paidas, when we walk into the Dakmu, we walk in pairs holding a white handkerchief to protect us from Naso. What are your thoughts, Rami uncle?
Kaivan has asked this question. It's a very interesting question. See, when a person dies, the Druje Nasu, that's a demon of putrefaction, okay, does not immediately take over the body. In fact, in the Vandidat, we are told that the manner of death, whether it's a natural death or an accidental death, even on the manner of death, the entry of the Druje Nasu is based on that. So if a person dies of natural death, the onslaught of Druje Nasu is faster. But if it's unnatural, accidental death, it is not that fast. Now, Kaivan, the thing is that the body becomes Naso only after Sachkar. So our tradition tells us not to touch a dead body after Sachkar. The onslaught of Druje Nasu is very slow and it is okay to touch the body till the time of Sachkar. So that's why this tradition of touching the body and saying the Ashembo is there is no harm. So that's why if you remember, you are told to last time hug the body, kiss the body if you want, and meet the dead body till Sachkar, till before Sachkar. After Sachkar, you are not supposed, the near ones also, nobody is supposed to touch the dead body after Sachkar. So that's why the Druje Nasuno actual onslaught starts after Sachkar. And we are told to do the Sachkar as soon as possible, within as few hours as possible. So Kaivan, answering your question once again, this tradition stands, touching the dead body and reciting Ashembo. It's only after Sachkar that those prescription about Naso, to not to touch, to keep away, to be in a pair at the time of the Paidas, all those prescriptions only start after the Sachkar. Is this clear, Kaivan, or you want to still get some clarification?
No, it's clear. Thank you so much, Ramya. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So this question is, what happens to a person who has died from euthanasia? So I suppose voluntarily ending one's life.
See, euthanasia is something which is a moral issue, more than a religious issue. Because at the time of euthanasia, the same thing happens. Like if a person takes a decision to stop the life support system for a person, or knowingly take the life of a person, it is, I think, it is a moral issue whether one is actually allowed to do or not also. So, leaving aside the moral issue, death is death. So, if a person is on support system, if you are asking from a point of view of religion, if a person is on a support system, then the onslaught of Druja Nasu is faster. But if a person is active at the time of euthanasia, then the onslaught of Druja Nasu is slower. I actually don't understand the question. Katie, can you be more specific? What do you mean by what happens to a person? Because euthanasia has very many reasons why you do euthanasia.
I'm not sure if Katie is online, but I suppose, can we perhaps in the essence of what euthanasia is, perhaps can we look at it that somebody who has a terminal disease, who has decided themselves that the time has come to leave this world, I suppose, is that an untimely death, or is that a natural death, or is it something that is predestined, not destined? Perhaps a little clarification there. What happens to the soul in that instance?
I see it is that life support system is artificially if a life support system is artificially keeping a person alive, and if the doctor is saying that all the organs of the body have given way, if the organs are not fit to keep you alive, are not have given way already, and if the person is just on life support system, then one has the right to remove that life support system. But that is provided the doctor has said 101% that there is not a single, even 0.01% of the person coming back to life. Even if there is a 0.01% of a person coming back to life, then it should not be done. And that's why euthanasia is such a big question, because it can be misused. It is something which can be grossly misused. So though it in some way it has some benefits, it has its negative effects also, and lots of debates have been done on that. So let's not go to that. But my personal view is that if the body has totally given way, and if the doctor certifies that yes, nothing can be done, and then it is okay to remove the life support system, according to me, if that you call it euthanasia. Otherwise, I don't see we have any right to take away the life of any person in any way. I know that it's only that person who can think about it and take a decision. The trauma, the pain, etc., is that person who is undergoing, and I don't want to comment on that. But I think one should try to get the courage to live on life as much as possible, because as we know, there is something called a miracle in life.
Thank you. Moving on, how does the soul progress to Garothman if it does not cross the Chinvad bridge?
Okay, a very good question. I did not mention this to you, but our soul, wherever it is stationed in the spiritual world, it progresses. How? We are not very clear, but the Pravashi guides the soul how to do good in a limited way. The soul still has something in a, even a soul is got some life in the other world, and it has a chance to progress. Now, Christianity believes in eternal damnation after death, whereas Zoroastrian religion does not believe in eternal damnation after death. So wherever the soul is, slowly, it can progress, because it is given tasks according to its stations in the spiritual world also. So it can progress in the stations of hell. A Hamestakan soul has the chance of going to heaven. The heaven soul has a chance to progress to Garotman. So the soul which has fallen down from the Chinvad bridge to what we call the Achishta Ahu, the worst existence, which in our parlance we call hell. Even then, that soul has the support of its Pravashi. A soul which is in hell is not left away. We people, that near and dear ones, will pray for the soul. The Pravashi will guide the soul. The other divine beings will guide the soul and help it to progress. Because actually hell is your own repentance. You repent because soulni consciousness avi gayi. Now it realizes what it has done in this world, the opportunities it has missed, and it is really wants to rectify it. So whatever task it is given, of course, with the body it is very fast. That's why we called our physical body the ally of the soul. Because when we are living, we can progress very easily and very fast. But our soul without the body is very helpless. It takes a much longer time to progress. But yet it does progress. As I said, from hell to Hamistakan, from Hamistakan to heaven, from heaven to Garotman. That's why we pray Ravan Garotmani Bhav. May it progress towards Garotman. May it keep progressing towards Garotman. We don't say rest in peace. Our souls don't rest in peace. Our souls have to keep progressing. The Zoroastrian soul, the Zoroastrian prayer for a soul is keep progressing. And that's why it's our duty also of the living one to keep on remembering the souls in a very pleasant manner, so that the soul gets that courage, get that joy to keep on going ahead. So we are working together even after they pass away. Even after they pass away, it's not a total cessation. They can help us when they want to help us. We can remember them whenever we want to remember them. We can feel them in spirit. We can love them however much we want. The only thing is they are not present with us physically, and that hurdle we have got to surmount. That hurdle of not being present physically. But once we surmount that hurdle, things will be easier and we can be more in touch with our dear departed ones.
It's very comforting. Can the prayers be performed at different locations, especially people who are living at different places? That's Kersi Uncle's question. Maybe a little clarification, Rami Uncle, on that.
I do understand Kersi Uncle's question. I do understand. What it is, there is no bar to having prayers performed in 100 locations. Just to give you an idea, if a big person like a Dasturji dies, his Uthamna is done at several places, if you recollect. Okay? A person like Homaji or Kukadaru Sahib or Jarthos Sahib, we do their Baj. Hundreds and thousands of people have their Baj done. So there is no harm if a person, a departed person, is remembered at several places. In fact, it's more of a joy to that person. But ideally, the family should come together and pray. That is the ideal thing. It's not like bhai behan che mara mari ki tu taru bana wo maru bana. That the soul will be a bit sad, because the soul wants the family to be united. The soul wants harmony and unity. So if it is not for the purpose of disharmony or disunity, And say if a son is staying in US and the daughter is staying in India and a third person is staying in Australia, and all of them want to remember the departed one, no harm. Everybody can do it in their own way.
That's good to know. So regarding the proper disposal of the body, what happens to a person who has donated his organs after death, as it will not be a complete body in itself? And second to that is, can the body be donated to medical institutions for medical students?
Jimmy, there is a very deep questions you have asked. One thing, let me be clear that the topic of organ donation is not there in any of our religious texts. So whatever I say or anybody else says, that is based in the premises of what you know. That is not written in the text. So that is my understanding of the texts. So what I believe is, as I said just now only, that the physical organs are as much a part of our body as the skin and the bones. And our religion says that they have to be given to Dhamyazar before the Charam Bamdad, at the time of the Charam Bamdad. So that's why we believe that the sooner the body goes to Dhamyazar, the better. And we are also told that the soul will again want its body at the time of what we call Rastakhes. There is a apocalyptic event called Rastakhes. So Rastakhes ને તને પસંદ વખતે સોલને પાછું પોતાનું આખું બોડી જોઈશે in a spiritual form. That is one premise on which I base my thinking that it is not wise to donate the organs of the body. The second thing is, we are told that as long as the body of that person is in the physical world, the soul will have a connection with the body for as long as the body is living and ticking. And according to me, this may hamper the progress of the soul in the spiritual world. So based on these two premises, I believe that organ donation is not so much of a wise decision according to the Zoroastrian religion. But finally, it is the decision of each and everybody, because I know that there are Dasturjis and there are religious scholars who advise organ donations. So based on their understanding of the religion, so be it. But according to my understanding of the religion, this is my standing. But of course, there is something called love, emotion, and affection. So if a mother thinks that her or child can get a life if she gives something to the child, then that overtakes the thought about religion and the soul, because that is the love of a mother or a father for a child. So then at such time, it surmounts all religion, it surmounts all the theory, it surmounts all the knowledge. So I would advise that you take the decision by yourself, do some homework on the topic, and come to your own decision and not depend on somebody to tell you this. Because as I said, in our religious text, and of course that is understandable, there is absolutely no mention about organ donation. So Jimmy, if you want to, I know it is an issue about which I can't give you a black and white answer, yes or no, because it is not possible for me to do so.
Thank you. What are the basic prayers after death?
As I've already mentioned, if what we call the Sagdid, the Sachkar, the Gesarna, the Paidas, the Saroshna Kardo, the Saroshna Match. This is a total different issue which we can go into. It is not possible to go into that issue just now because it itself a topic by itself, death ceremonies. So Casey, if there is any particular question, because what are the basic prayers after death? Do you mean the first 3 days after death or forever after death? What is the question?
Thank you, Dr. Ramya. What I was meaning is, what are the minimum things, at least for the first year? Of course, then it can continue. What are the minimum things for the first year? Thank you.
First year.
Yeah.
First year after death.
Yeah, yes, of course. I mean, first year means in the after the person has passed away, the very first year.
Okay, so first 4-day rituals are there. We have already discussed about them, which are necessary. Okay, that is Sagdi, Sachkar, Gesarnu, Paidas, Saroshno Kardo, Saroshni Baj, then Chauramni Baj, Uthamna, Damnu Afargan. All these are first 4-day kriyas.
Correct.
After Charam, we have the Afargan, Farokshi, Baj, and Satu. These 4 prayers have to be done at certain particular times. Like on the Charam day, on the Dasma day, on the Masisa day, possibly every month, the day of the death, and the final year.
Yes.
Then there is something called Siroja, which is
That's
done
right.
one day prior to the Masisa and the Varsi.
That's right.
And then during the month, this is optional, but people often have the Farvadin Roj done, the Parab done, and the Gambar done,
I see.
which comes alternate months. So these are optional.
Yes.
But at least for 1 year, this many prayers need to be done. And of course, the Muktad.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
the Muktad and the full prayers in the Muktad, the separate table is not necessary, but separate prayers are necessary.
Thank you.
That leads to the next question is, how long should the Muktad ceremonies be performed for the dead?
See, I would say 1 year is compulsory. 5 years in the present time is optimum. But then it depends on the choice of the person. It could be done there is no upper end to it.
Mhm.
You can have it done for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, depending on the availability of the priest and the financial condition, etc. But in the present times, 1 year compulsory, 5 year optimum.
Thank you. At the time of doing Page Parvanu, when you bow near the dead body, what should one say?
What I say, there is again religion man athi lakhiyo. But first of all, we say that Sarosh Yazadni Pana Hojo to the soul. Because koi gujri jaye, tare for the first 3 days and nights, the soul requires the loving care of Sarosh Yazad. So the first thing you should say is Sarosh Yazadni Pana Hojo, Sarosh Yazad Pana Ba. Okay, then Ravan Garothmani Baat, तो जल्दी से तमारू Ravan Garothman में जाए, तेवी हमें दुआ करनी चाहिए. And then one Ashem Vahu, because Ashem Vahu is the most important and soothing prayer at the time of the death. So this is what I do when I Page Parao near a person who has passed away. Sarosh Yazat Mi Pana, Ravan Garothmani Baat, and at least one Ashem Vahu. And if it's possible, and if nobody is doing it, I do sit next to the person and pray as long as possible. And then we advise the person who's a near and dear one to at least do it till the body goes in the years to the Dungarwadi, until the Sachkar is done. Somebody is supposed to continually do that.
Thank you. Do we have a family in the spirit world apart from God? And how are the souls selected to go to families into the physical world?
Yeah, we do have a family in the spiritual world. If you remember, I said that as soon as we die, our dear ones come to receive us. You remember I said that. And they do keep with us till the Charamni Bamdat for the first 3 days, comforting the soul. But then they have a greater mission, their own progress to look after. Because see, afterwards, the whole equation changes at the time of death. We don't realize that. At the time of death, our family is very small. But after death, our family becomes huge. And God becomes our father. And that consciousness comes to the soul. So, of course, that our small family will remain with us. But it has a more important mission to perform, the progress. So આજના વખતમાં કેમ આપણે કહેતે ગયા આપણું કામ કરવા, તેવી રીતના everybody is busy in their own work. That does not mean that bond has ended, but they don't remain with you all the time. Each soul has to look after its own progress till we meet again in Garothman, so to say. But that's not there. During the days of Muktad, there is a holiday for the souls. So all the souls come during the days of the Muktad. So they meet, greet, make merry, and again depart. So that's they have that holiday season. So of course we have a family in the spiritual world also, and we do think of them, we do be with them, but majority of the time we are busy in our own progress, because our final goal is to go to my father's home. મને મારા પપ્પાને ઘરે જવું છે, Garothman. So that is your main aim at that time.
Thank you.
So, and how are the souls selected to go to families? I think every soul has its journey, and every soul has its own journey and has its own evolution and its own purpose. So based on that, perhaps from the spiritual world, the soul is selected to go to a particular family. Okay.
Fair enough. The next question has already been addressed, which is praying the death prayers whilst one is living. So if you don't mind, we'll move on to the question after that, which is, what is the significance of dharam juice on a person's deathbed?
See, basically, at the time of deathbed, we have to, when a person is on the deathbed, we have to give as much solace to the person as possible, to the soul. Why do we say an Ashemvo? It is to give solace to the soul that, see, you have lived a righteous life and you don't need to worry. That is the message to the soul when we are saying Ashemvo. That you have lived a righteous life and you don't need to worry. Be happy. Have Ushta. So the purpose of giving originally home juice, home juice was given when it was possible. So that is again to comfort the soul. Give it a part of something which has been ritually consecrated to the soul, because it will comfort the soul which is about to leave the body, they say. And dharam no juice, because when home no juice is not available, the only other substitute is dharam no juice, because dharam is the only fruit which is supposed to be the fruit of immortality. Dharam was an evergreen tree in Iran, and it still is an evergreen tree in Iran, and it reminds a person of immortality. And that's why the dharam no juice tells the soul that don't worry, you are immortal. And this is not the end. You are just going over a transition. So that is just a small, gentle reminders to the soul.
That's lovely.
Because the soul is very confused at that time.
Yeah. I'm not sure about the next question, but I'm just going to read it as it is. From Maruk, there would be so many souls in heaven or hell, depending upon the life led. So they wouldn't enter into a body of another being to be born in another family. I'm not sure what to make of what exactly that is. If Maruk is online, then perhaps a little clarification is required.
Second part is not very clear. So they wouldn't enter
Yeah.
into the body of another being
Yeah.
to be born in another family.
Yeah, hello. I would like to clarify. So that means I know you said in the beginning, Ramya uncle, that we don't believe in rebirth.
Yes.
So that's what I was thinking, that all this time, at least I was thinking, that our soul goes and gets into another pregnant woman's body, and the baby is born with that soul, sort of thing. The soul gets into that physical baby, and the baby is born at that particular moment or something. Is that what we believe in?
So, Maruk, that is an Indian tradition, and many Parsis do believe in the doctrine of reincarnation. But after studying the religion, I don't feel or I don't. I'm sure that it is not a part of our religious tradition or religious mainstream religious philosophy. Okay, like to give you a very simple example, I was born on Debdin Road on the day on which my grandfather died. So my grandfather, it was a comforting thing for her to believe that my husband has returned back. So that's why Ramyar was the name of her husband that was given to me. So this is a very comforting thought that my dear one has come back.
Yeah, yeah.
But whether you need a comforting thought or whether you want to stick to the doctrines of the religion, teachings of the religion is your call.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
can't tell anybody believe in this, don't believe in this.
Mm-hmm.
So I leave it to people's good judgment. But as long as I understand the religion, the soul need not come back to the earth and again be born physically to fulfill its mission.
So the soul goes up and up and up and gets Garotman. And where does it stop? Like it just keeps on and on and on, getting higher and higher?
Yeah, Garotman is the house of God, we are told. And that is the final destination of the soul.
How do we know that the soul has gone to the final destination? We as like in the real world, our dear
Why do we
departed ones.
human beings want to know everything? Leave something to God. Leave something to faith. No, I'm sure there is no way to know when a soul has reached Garotman. I hope somebody develops an app and it will become a hit. Soul has reached Garotman, ping ping. Jokes aside, but there's no way to know. We just have to hope that dear ones in due course of time, because they have been good on earth, they will reach Garotman.
Yeah. Well, how they have left the life in earth on the land.
Exactly. That is the best marker to know where they will be.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Rami uncle. To keep our Gasri ready, we keep sadras. Do we have to keep new or old sadras? And is it our own sadra?
See, once again, here we have the backing of the Vandida, which says we have to use good worn clothes for a dead body. We should not, and our own clothes as much as possible, but in good condition, washed. So you don't need to use brand new clothes. It has to be preferably your own used clothes for your Gasri.
I see.
But when that is not available, your own clothes, then of course you can borrow somebody from your families or something. But generally it has, because it is a wastage, because finally the clothes will be destroyed. So we don't believe in wastage. Our religion does not believe in wastage. That's why there's very wise guidance has been given in the Vandida, that we have to use our own used nice, good clothes, washed clothes.
Thank you. We've already clarified on organ donation. So I think we'll move on from that question. If someone does not want any prayers to be performed after death, what happens to his or her soul, and does it progress or not?
See, our ancestors have given us certain directions, and those directions are for a certain reason. We should not be so wise so as to overcome something which has come down to us since thousands of years. Of course, they have given this direction because it is good for the soul. But say in your wisdom or in our wisdom, we decide not to have the rituals performed, then perhaps it may be that the soul will have a bit of discomfort. See, we are told that finally all souls will reach Garotman, irrespective of however evil you are, irrespective of whatever rituals you have performed or not. But it is how much comfort you are giving to the soul at the time of death. So I feel and I believe that rituals help the soul and the living and give it a comfort. So in the wisdom of religion, we do need to have them performed. And if we don't perform them, then perhaps the soul will find it difficult. It will reach Garotman eventually, but it will be much tougher for the soul.
Can the Muqtad prayers be restarted after a few years of stopping?
Of course, it can be.
Good to know. And for how many years, sorry, let me start that again. For how many years after death should the annual Varsi prayers be performed for the dead?
That I just replied, 5 years optimum. It's same as
Same as Muqtad.
1 year compulsory,
Yeah.
5 year optimum. Then there is no upper limit. It depends on you.
Perfect. In our Parsi religion or Zoroastrian religion, why do we place the body for the birds, vultures to eat? As some are living overseas, is cremation better or burial, as we don't have a Dungarwadi? I think that's a very practical question, to be honest.
See, in the first place, there are some this thing of the religion, some teachings of the religion. Okay. Now, when we came from Iran to India, there were no dakmas at that time, but we built the dakmas over here because we felt it was necessary. Now, once people start living overseas, this is of course not possible. So, what you are asking me is whether cremation is better or burial. Now, from the point of view of religion, the religion has not given any option. It is saying both are, the only option is Dokme Nashini. But if one does not have that option, then from the two, it's not that I am advocating, but from our logical thinking, Bhumida, that is burying in the earth, is a preferable way to go than cremation, because cremation is a direct affront to the fire, which we hold very sacred. So that's why you may have noticed that wherever there are no dakhmas in India also, they have aramgas. In many places in India. Even in London, they have a aramga. At a place which I don't immediately, Breastwood or some place. So that way, the religion is not giving you an option, as I said. But if you ask me, today in the Parsi tradition, burial is preferred over cremation. But like in today's times, in COVID times, God forbid anybody should not be having it. But unfortunately, those who have it, it's a government's injunction to, up till now at least, to have the body burned compulsory. So what to do at such times? It's just to accept what is there, because you can't go against the law. So many very devout Zoroastrians, unfortunately, have had to go that way. So in the times that we are living, we have to make do with the best available thing. You must be knowing that there were some people who were staying abroad who had wished that their body be sent back for Dokme Nashini. I have heard of such cases also. So there are options available. But I know that is very expensive and the body is mummified. And there are several things that we don't have time to go into all those things. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Probably the second last question or last question. People whose religion uses cremation believe in reincarnation. What if we are cremated against the requirement of our religion? I'm not sure if that's separate to the...
Burzin, what we say is in our religion, in our tradition, there is a saying, Chare tokshak achare khwarsanli, which means when it is possible, try your best to do it. When it is not possible, be content with it. Okay, there are certain things which are totally beyond our hands. So your question that people, what if we are cremated against the requirement of our religion? We have to hope and pray at such point that the other Ashofarohas, what we call Ganje Matran, that is the collection of all the prayers in the universe, all those things know that this decision was not of the departed one. The person was forced to do it, and they would intervene at such times and take care of the soul. These traditions are also there in our religion, that when a person is perforced made to do a certain thing, Like when a person dies at sea, many a times the body is put at sea, especially in the olden times. So when some things like these happen, and when the person has not taken the decision to go against the religion, at such times, the spirit of the religion, the fravashis, the collective prayers come in, intervene, and take care of the soul.
Thank you. And the last question of the day is, can we pray Satam Nu Kardo daily for our dearly departed souls?
Yeah, of course we can. Of course we can.
Wonderful. On that note, we will call it come to an end to the beautiful presentation. As always, Ramya Uncle, I want to thank you on behalf of all the attendees today. It was truly a fascinating talk, and I think it's always a subject that we as human beings are by nature very curious about.
But sweep under the carpet.
Pardon?
But
Yes.
we sweep it under the carpet.
Thank you
I
very
think
much, Dr. Karanjit. Thank you, Kainaz, and thank you to every one of you who've been attending. It's been a very interesting talk. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all very much for all the graciousness shown all through the months and years. Yazdan Panabad.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Please send me the what is it called here?